Welcome back. President Muhammadu Buhari at the second United States-Africa Business Forum in New York on Wednesday assured potential foreign investors that Nigeria remains the #1 investment destination in Africa, promising wide-ranging reforms on ports, fiscal incentives such as 5-year tax holidays for activities classified as pioneer, tax-free operations, no restrictions on repatriate quotas in free trade zones, and a value-added tax regime of 5%. Now, this comes as members of the National Assembly resumed plenary after a 7-week annual recess. So they resumed into a recession. The Senate President, Dr. Bukola Saraki, outlined steps the president-led government must take to get the country's economy out of the current recession, including devising immediate strategies that would ease the suffering of Nigerians. On the other hand, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Yakubu Dogara, says, quote, "We must also consult the abundant pool of experts, both in Nigeria and abroad, to fashion out short and medium and long-term measures for dealing with the present crisis and setting our country on the path of sustained economic growth." Now, to achieve economic revival, what is the role of the legislature? Joining me to look at this is a political economist and country director, Senegal's Development Innovation, Wale Ajadi. Wale is live to us from wide-ranging reforms on ports, fiscal incentives, talking about tax holidays, among others. Do you think the laws encourages this?
Well, we have presently got laws that could encourage it. The challenge for the executive is to apply it effectively and to allow the people who, let me just backtrack a little bit. There are two dimensions to what needs to happen. One is the formal and the informal sector. We have talked extensively about the formal sector, about investors coming in and creating a climate for investors, and I think that there's a clear idea of what needs to be done. But what you rarely ever hear is what has to happen to the informal sector. The informal sector is about 70% of Nigeria's economy. If the legislators really want to do something genuinely, they need to enable the informal sector in a structured, disciplined, and consistent way, consistent with the government's lead, to make sure that Nigeria is a more conducive place, because we have a structural issue in our economy.
Well, Wale, at this time, tough choices need to be made. A strong legislative framework for economic recovery, if you like, and you already mentioned the very key sector, the informal sector. So what should be the priority of the legislature at this time to try to encourage that informal sector, which accounts for about 70% of the economy, to actually thrive at this time? In a time of recession, it is very challenging.
Well, the first thing they have to know is what role do they really want to play. The government is giving, the executive is giving leadership. They have to play an enabling role. Part of that enabling role is to illustrate this with one example. How much is their conversation driven by data and research rather than emotive posturing? They need to know what is really happening in the informal economy, and I can guarantee you they do not know what is happening in the informal economy. All they have is emotional bluster. They need to make sure that there is a consistent approach to gathering data about the labor market. How many people are economically active in Nigeria? How many people are economically active and contributing to the tax receipts? What are the ways in which people can have economic activity that is consistent with the future that we want? That is one critical area. I mean, they can actually demonstrate by giving an example. There are many social science graduates who can be researchers in the National Assembly. If they could even bring some discipline to their data collection and recruit these young people into the National Assembly, there will be some impact. They certainly have to invest in our markets, our local markets, making sure that they're standardized, not directly investing, but creating laws that prioritize the local markets where people trade, where they exchange goods, where they produce goods. I mean, about 60% of our produce that go into the market is wasted. That's an indictment. Goods that come from the farm to the market are wasted.
Well, Wale, we've got, taking a look at the website of the National Assembly, I noticed that we've got a plethora of bills actually, needing their attention, and they've also, got to handle issues that, concern their constituents. And at this time, the economy is a very huge concern to the constituents. So taking a look at those bills, from the bills that regulate the capital market to regulating critical sectors of the economy, including manufacturing, maritime, the capital market, which for you should be taking priority at this time? All of them are really very important. But as they sit down to begin to have this deliberations, to have this debate, which for you should take priority?
Well, I think that we need to give priority to anything that is related to agriculture. Agriculture, agriculture, agriculture. That's the short-term survival need of Nigeria, both domestically and internationally. If they can create an environment where agriculture continues to transform from subsistence and development to business, where smallholder farmers are properly organized, where their efforts are consistently processed and get to the marketplace, that would be very important. The second thing is to try and find a way to make sure that we are market-led in our developments. So we need to clearly understand what's happening in our markets, whether they're formal markets or informal markets. So, for example, if you take the labor market, we don't know what areas of skills are there gaps in Nigeria. So we don't know the graduates that we are graduating from the universities, whether they are needed in the economy or not. The people who leave secondary schools, whether they have any viability in the labor market that we have or not. Only 10% of the current labor market, or about 10 million of the current labor market, is actually from the formal sector. How do we organize these things? Those are the structural things that have to happen. So I think that their role should be enabling the executive to be able to do the things that they need to do into creating the right policies that can take us forward.
So now, do you think the National Assembly needs to review the exclusive legislative list and, for instance, maybe devolve some of the powers to the states and local governments to address issues in diversification? You actually mentioned agriculture. So should they be looking at doing that?
I agree with you. That's an essential point. Because the states don't have a constitution of their own, there is a certain disparity. But what is interesting is that the agriculture is on the concurrent list. So the states have responsibility, local governments have responsibility for agriculture. If we are going to make agriculture the short-term quick win that is going to transform our economy, we have to do everything, such as you suggested, to make sure that they are taking responsibility at the state level and at the local government level to make sure that agriculture is number one.
But Wale, any time now, the 2017 budget will be presented to the National Assembly for debate. How do you expect that to play out? Bearing in mind that this budget is likely going to be tagged budget of recession. And so in a recession, you need to do things quickly and as soon as possible. So how do you expect things to play out when eventually they get the 2017 appropriation bill?
Well, let me first caution something. Speed does not mean going in the right direction. I think we have a structural economic problem. Many people think that we can turn this thing around in a year or two, and that's very unlikely. If we turn anything around at all, it will be short term. The longer term, what we have to be starting to do is make sure that the policies are consistent and sustainable. And with regards to agriculture and also solid minerals, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. So if agriculture is not central to the next budget, we have a problem. If solid minerals is not emergent in the next budget, we have a next problem. I will add another issue to this, which is not on the front and is more longer term, but very critical for the next generation and next generation after that. And that's the issue of education. Children are coming out of school without any career guidance. Everybody is expecting to go to university and have capacity. The economy is going to depend on the assets we have amongst our people. How we do that is going to be very critical to even getting out of the recession and sustaining ourselves. We need to invest all our energy in making sure people come out of school with clarity of what they want to do, their life purpose, so that we can put them and support them to become effective, productive contributors to the society. The issue of productivity is critical too. What is the productivity level at the moment? What's the productivity level we should be looking for in the longer term? How do we become competitive in the world? Because whether you put a plaster on this one or not, these structural problems have to be handled, and we have to start doing it now, not later on.
So Wale, you've mentioned some very key aspects that you're hoping that the next deliberations, when eventually the 2017 budget gets to the National Assembly, they should begin to focus on. What do you make of pre-budget consultations between the executive and the legislature?
Well, I certainly think that sometimes we focus on government budgets in the absence of any kind of organizational framework otherwise. The first question you have to ask yourself is, how is the Nigerian government budget funded? How many people pay taxes? Enough for the budget to be funded by the people. Our goal must be to make sure that our budgets are funded by the people. Then the people will ask the right questions of the money that has been expended, and why it's been expended in a particular way, and what are our priorities as a nation. If we move from just the fact that people vote in election to a participatory system of government, where people really actively participate, the old budgetary padding and posturing and all of that will reduce, because when you go back to your constituencies, they ask you, they're informed. They know exactly what is going on, because it's their money you're spending. Right now, nobody can say it's their money that's being spent. They know that the money is coming from somewhere, and they have great expectation of government. And one of our challenges is that we have incredible expectation of government to transform our lives, and we work, in spite of the fact that our daily lives suggest that we depend on ourselves to do many of the things. We need to have a right balance and a right coordinated approach to this.
So in having the right balance and the right coordinated approach, devising immediate strategies is what is on the front burner. That's what for the Speaker, or for the Senate President, Dr. Bukola Saraki, that's his own right now. Immediate strategies to get Nigeria out of recession. What should him and his colleagues at the House of Representatives sit down now and be talking about? Yes, they want the president, the executive, to come and brief the National Assembly on what steps, what strategies are they looking at to take Nigeria out of recession. But for them, in this hallowed chambers at the Senate and at the House of Representatives, what should they be talking about? How should they be going about it?
Firstly, they should accept that they're not responsible for the strategy for this. The strategy comes from the executive, because they are the ones that are going to execute it. The second thing they should do is understand what the executive strategic approach is, and hold them to question and make sure they understand what the strategy of the executive is. It is from that they start to identify the key areas they can intervene to play an enabling role for the executive to realize the effectiveness of their strategy. That means that they have to understand what are the laws that are necessary for those strategies to work. What are the information that they need to make the right kinds of laws? In what ways can they behave differently to how they're behaving now to make sure that that agreed strategy is consistent? Because what the world is looking at is a consistent strategic approach from Nigeria. What we are expecting, what Africa is expecting from us, is to lead the way in handling many things that we don't handle effectively right now. And that means that the executive and the legislature have to be coordinated and understand what is our way out of this. Now, I don't think that focusing on this particular recession is a short-term thing. I think it's a long-term thing. And I think that they should actually have consistent conversation with each other over a long period of time to understand why it is the executive wants to take a particular approach. Let's take the issue of asset sales. I'm sorry to go back into that. I mean, you want to sell parts of the LNG to raise money. The question is, are you selling it in a way that would have a long-term benefit, or just a short-term bridge over the current shortfall? Is that helpful to the country on the longer term, or is it just helpful to this administration, whether legislative or executive? We have to know why we're doing things.
Okay.
We just can't react to things because it's right in front of us.
Wale, thank you so much for sharing your perspectives with us this morning on the program. But Business Morning continues in just a moment. Stay with us.